Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to you all. And there's a live recording of audio and video at this meeting, and it's being live streamed to the community via the City of Hobart YouTube channel. I suggest that if there's any elected member present who has not yet signed into the meeting in accordance with our COVID-19 safe plan, please do so now. And if all mobile devices can either be turned off or put onto silent. We have everybody present, so welcome to the committee. We have on my left Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis and Alderman Briscoe. And have we got anybody joining us from live stream?
Sherlock has just come on.
And welcome Councillor Sherlock, who's not a member of the committee, but thank you for coming along. In the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal people, the Palawa and Pakana people of Tasmania, La Trawitta, and acknowledge their elders past and present, and acknowledge also any First Nations people and Aboriginal people here today or listening. Item 1, we don't have anybody to, no need to co-opt. Item 2 is confirmation of the minutes from the last meetings. Councillor Dutta, thank you. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 3 is consideration of supplementary items, and we have item 12. Thank you, Alderman Barakis. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 4 is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Conflicts? No. Right, we move on. Item 5 is transfer of agenda items. No. Item 6, planning items or Planning Authority items, consideration of items with deputations. Do you have any? Thank you, Councillor Coates. I think this is a bidding. Yeah, this is like being. Okay, so we have items with deputations. So we'll hear those first. Those in favour, those against, and I suggest, if committee is willing, that we hear the items as they are on our deputation list. So after 7.1.1 and 7.1.2, we'll go to the closed agenda and have to just, what's the word? Suspend the open meeting at that stage.
Does that need a motion or?
We've got that with the deputation, so that should be fine, I think. All right, so item 7, committee acting as a planning authority. 7.1 is applications under the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme. We go to 7.1.1, which is 48 to 50 Newtown Road, Newtown. And we have 3 representors. First representor is Ms Vicky Tabor. If you'd like to come to the table, please. Thank you. It's a bit different from not being in the committee room. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Just all these COVID rules. So you have 5 minutes, and then we'll ask any questions that we might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you all for allowing me to speak to the committee today. I'd also like to say thank you to Council's planning staff, who've obviously spent a great deal of time and effort in scrutinising the details of the proposed building. It was pleasing to see the changes that have been suggested to the very heavy facade of this particular rendering and in relation to signage, so thank you for that. My main issue of concern, however, is in relation to the traffic impact assessment report, which is provided in support of the development, as I don't believe it's been given the scrutiny it deserves. The author of this TIA is also the author of the TIA for the Blue Gum site at the top of Elizabeth Street, which you'd all be quite familiar with. In that report, it's noted, however, and I quote, Elizabeth Street is a major arterial road connecting the Hobart CBD and North Hobart Shopping Centre to the residential suburbs to the north and the Glenorchy municipality beyond. That report mentions high two-way traffic volumes along Elizabeth Street, somewhere in the vicinity of 16,000 to 17,000 vehicles per hour at peak periods. That report also quotes council's own traffic count from late 2011 along that stretch of road as being in excess of 21,000 vehicles a day passing during that 24-hour site. Why is it then that every version of the TIA put forward in support of the From Next development quotes traffic volumes of only 8,000 vehicles a day when these sites are only a matter of hundreds of metres apart? Traffic doesn't miraculously arrive at one end of this strip of Newtown Road and then disappear at the other. It comes to the development site via the surrounding road network from the city, through North Hobart and other surrounding residential suburbs. When modelling for traffic growth for the next 10 years, this TIA actually already refers to the section of Newtown Road north of Argyle Street as being at near saturation levels already. The other issue where some poetic licence seems to have been applied is in relation to modelling the traffic generation from the development. Despite having previously relied on 3 industry standards for this purpose, this TIA relies on a one-off traffic count taken at Calvary Hospital. With some smoke and mirrors applied, 160 vehicles per hour in the morning peak is now taken as being the traffic generation fact in relation to this development. How could a one-off count at Calvary possibly be given any validity in these considerations, particularly when using the 3 industry standards previously relied upon, resulting in traffic numbers of closer to 290 or 320 vehicle movements? This TIA also seems to be silent on the potential traffic conflicts generated by these vehicles, which will be turning across the flow of traffic in Newtown Road all day to enter or exit the site. Using an average of 300 vehicles per hour, this equates to 1 vehicle every 20 to 30 seconds. This is in addition to the heavy vehicle traffic movements being shared between Newtown Road and Clare Street, and although the TIA promotes traffic remedies and changes, these have yet to be agreed to by Council and will push resident and commuter parking further into the surrounding residential streets. It's actually this intensity, the increasing intensity of use of this site and various aspects of that which are not adequately considered in the TIA. These include that every version of the building plan sees the floor space of the hospital getting bigger, particularly in relation to inpatient beds, which now includes 4 high dependency beds. The activity generated by the tenancies is also unknown at this time, nor is there any guarantee that they won't later become inpatient bed spaces. The churn between the morning and afternoon lists in the day surgery facility is not considered, nor is the arrival of 130 staff required to be on site before 7 a.m. to get that activity underway. At a time when Council is investing significant effort and resources into addressing the traffic and parking issues in North Hobart, how can a development generating such traffic volumes be allowed to be shoehorned into an inner residential suburb only a matter of hundreds of metres away from North Hobart? Whilst I acknowledge there is an argument for a development such as is proposed, this sliver of a multi-use zone on a narrow arterial road in an inner residential suburb is not the site for it. We've been advised previously by the proponents that every version they've put forward complies with the planning scheme, when clearly they did not. Whilst this version of the building may be closer to actually meeting those requirements, I strongly urge the committee and the council to consider whether a development of this intensity of use is appropriate for an inner residential suburb. We all know what the proponents are going to say in a moment, but I'll ask you...
30 seconds if you'd like
thanks,
to.
But I'll ask you this honestly. Would you allow this development to be built in Battery Point if it served the greater good of Hobart or Tasmania? I think we all know what the answer to that would be. Yet that's exactly what's happening here, as the residents of Newtown and surrounding suburbs are being asked to pay an unreasonable cost for the convenience and business models of others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll open it to the committee and Councillor Sherlock for questions. I'll start with you, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. It was very concise, and I understand your objections there. Have you considered that the Woolworths supermarket further down Newtown Road would have similar sorts of traffic issues?
Yes, well, past the end of Newtown Road, going past the end of Argyle Street, yes, is at near saturation levels, according to the traffic report.
So we're talking about as you go towards Risdon Road from Newtown?
Yes, head north.
Yeah. Well, I personally never struck any issues of cars going in and out, and that would have a similar volumes, I imagine, to the hospital. But anyway, if you've, and I would have thought that traffic changes around there and did work. Now that's been there for about 20 years, hasn't it? Or 15 to 20 years. And the same fears that you're expressing now were expressed about that Woolworths supermarket and were allayed by after it went into operation. But anyway, if you consider that, that's fine, and I take on board the other things you've said. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Harvey, did you have a question?
No, not for the.
Alderman Bribus?
Look, just thank you, Chair. Just jumping on the traffic impact issue. Appreciating what you put forward about the Blue Gum site. Just to try and, just so we're comparing apples with apples, so to speak, would you not agree with the idea that perhaps a large part of the traffic from Blue Gum would be wrapping around and going to Newtown, Lena Valley, rather than continuing straight past that road? I think I'm just suggesting there might be some differences between the impact of Blue Gum and the impact, given that it's a straighter bit of road.
It wasn't so much the impact of Blue Gum, it was actually that report relied on council's data from 10 years ago that talked about in excess of 21,000 vehicle movements a day. Now we are talking literally a couple of hundreds of metres up the road, and we're talking 13,000 vehicle movements difference. Now that data's 10 years old, and I cannot believe that those 13,000 vehicles go up and down Augusta Road.
Any further questions? Councillor Data?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I appreciate some of the facts that you've shared. From the previous application, I understand there were about 6 or 7 grounds on which it was refused. This time around, it appears that you have focused on just one aspect, which is traffic. So is that the only aspect that concerns?
I would think it's fair to say the focus is more on the increase of intensity of use of the site. So, you know, the building has been presented numerous times, it's gone through numerous, squashing, green walls, the Royal Cruise Liner version. We've had a number of versions of the building. This is the one that's probably closest to actually meeting the planning scheme. The difficulty for the residents is actually the use of the building and the intensity of activity that's generated by the use of the building, more so than the building itself now.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
My question is, and I'll ask the proponents the same question. How do you perceive the entry and exit from the building, car entry, exit, and also the dropping off of patients and the picking up of patients?
I have to say, after the first version, traffic engineers did a good job because we were originally going to have 2 entries on and off Newtown Road, and one of those was directly opposite Warrigal Avenue, which would have been an absolute disaster. So I'm thankful for the input for the 1 entry, as you've said, Councillor Harvey. However, the numbers of movements will not just be morning peak or afternoon peak, they'll also be during the day. It is proposed the bus stop is moved, which will be further south. That will actually be in the line of sight of when you leave that driveway. So one of the concerns that was raised in a previous version, that had traffic only been allowed to turn north from the building, that people would actually either do U-turns or they will go to the bottom of Stoke Street, that little shortcut near the park, and go across Argyle Street, which is something we don't want people doing hundreds of times a day.
Any questions? My question, Ms. Tabor, was similar. So the impacts from your perspective, because you live opposite that site. So how? Do you think the changes minimise the problems associated with coming in and out? Apart from the volume, obviously you're talking about the volume.
No, it's all about the volume, really. I mean, it's not a very wide road. So we have, the bus stop, the median strip, the traffic either side. You want to try to have something parked, something moving, and then something turning, whereas technically it might happen. That's if everyone's in exactly where they should be on the right spot on the road. I know when we had some work done on the lights up at Augusta Road and one of those lanes was closed, traffic was banking up past down Argyle Street, and right back towards Newtown Road down that way. So it doesn't take much to actually cause a lot of banking, and lack of visibility will be a concern.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just so that you're aware, and I'm not sure if this got through to you, but and there's certainly a memo for elected members that just in relation to car parking in paragraph 6.14.1, it talks about 339 car parking spaces required, but in actual fact it requires 238 car parking spaces. In anybody's terms, that's quite a lot of cars to contend with on the site. Paragraph 6.14.2, the proposal includes 236 car parking spaces, which should read 248 car parking spaces. So I hope that elected members have at least had a chance to have a look at that. In relation to the traffic, I mean, you've talked about the cars going from the site, so you're expecting that that's going to peak early in the morning, so that's not necessarily in peak hour traffic?
No, quite likely, because staff need to be on site prior to the 7 o'clock of patients checking in. So my experience with day surgeries is, you know, you'll have a morning session, then you'll have an afternoon session with, I think there's 26 beds now or something, and about 24 in the day surgery area. So there's going to be a fair bit of churn. So people come and drop people off and then they'll come and pick them up. People will come and visit. People will work there. I think the first two TIAs, and that's where that data came from, are talking 130 people coming on site every morning to get started.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll ask you to take your seat again, please, and we'll just wipe down the table. Thanks, Rachel. Everybody got a chance to have a look at that memo? There's quite a lot of paperwork involved with the agenda today. Thank you, and I'll call now Ms. Rebecca Thompson. Could you come to the table, please? Thank you. So if you have different points from Ms. Tabor, please, if you could make those, and we'll ask questions in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Rebecca Thompson, and I own my home and live in Jennings Street, Newtown. I'm very concerned about this application for a private hospital for the following reasons. The precinct, I believe, is not suitable for private hospital. It is predominantly a residential precinct with some schools quite distant from myself and some small businesses. The few other business buildings in the area that are more than one storey are not built immediately adjacent to or abutting residential homes, as in this proposal. My other concern is, as with the first speaker, the amount of traffic that would be generated by such a development, then that it would impact negatively on surrounding residential areas. I do not accept that the proposed traffic levels cited are accurate representation of the actual traffic levels now in Clare Street and the intersection of Clare Street and Augusta Road. The traffic congestion in that intersection presently during peak hours and at other times is already at capacity and is often onerous with marked delays turning left into Augusta Road from Clare Street. Often for as long as it takes for the traffic light changes 3 times at Augusta Road and Newtown Road before you can actually turn out of Clare Street into Augusta Road. It's even worse if someone is trying to turn right into Augusta Road. In fact, I believe that there should be a no right turn sign at that intersection, because if someone's waiting there to turn right, you sometimes have to wait 5 minutes to get out. Also, Clare Street is not wide enough to accommodate current traffic at the proposed entrance site to the proposed development, let alone cope with increases. Currently, buses or large trucks block two-way traffic in that section of Clare Street now. the adjacent streets, which are already being parked out by commuters parking all day while they take a bus or walk to the city for work. I presume this is due to the parking restrictions now being imposed in some of the North Hobart and Newtown precincts. So the people who are parking going into the city are parking out our residential streets. A new hospital of this size on Newtown Road will only bring more street parking in adjacent streets like Seymour Street, Jennings Street and others nearby. Some days, currently, there are hardly any vacant parking spaces in my street, Jennings Street, in the middle of the day. I predict that if this development goes ahead, Council will have residents of Seymour Street, Jennings Street and other adjacent streets lobbying Council to have parking restrictions in our street with exemption permits for residents, which would be hardly enjoyable. Therefore, I propose that the project not be approved for these reasons. At a minimum, prior to approval, an up-to-date traffic survey of Clare Street and Augusta Road should be done to determine the actual capacity for them to cope with the Clare Street access to the proposed site. I think that is going to be a horrible bottleneck. Also, a survey of street parking and concentration in Clare Street and adjoining streets in the area be done to determine the impact of more parking requirements due to the development, because I don't believe that the parking requirements, the parking being provided in the proposed development will meet the need.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll open it to the committee for questions. Start with you, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. The first one is in regards to some of the problems that you have referred to. Do you think these problems can be solved by the infrastructure or the council itself? You know, some of the points that you have highlighted. That's question one. And question number two, you talked about parking. As I've heard that the applicant is providing a lot more than what is required. Won't that solve the particular problem that you've raised?
Well, regarding infrastructure, I think that there is not a capacity, no matter how much council wanted to improve the infrastructure there in that section of Clare Street. I think that is a bottleneck now. It's presenting problems now without the extra traffic that it'll bring. Be great if it could, but it is, as I say, two-way traffic is blocked when the buses are going down Clare Street in that area. In relation to parking, I agree with the previous speaker that when you look at the number of patients, the number of staff and the number of visitors to the hospital, I don't think that the parking being provided will be anywhere near appropriate for the capacity. And so I think they will overflow into my street and others.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just on the topic of, or I suppose it would be workers, but as well as other people parking in the residential area to access the hospital. That's something that's obviously been an issue in recent times. It's one that I've banged on about. But if the applicants are providing parking in excess of what's required, I imagine that they'd be providing adequate parking for the site. Would that not limit the amount of overflow that's going on into the residential area?
Well, when I have looked at the numbers of patients and staff, and then people who are delivering the patients and picking up patients, I agree with the previous speaker that it will not be adequate to meet it all. We're at capacity now, but I really believe the traffic flow issue is going to be the biggest issue. The concentration of more cars and obviously also heavier vehicles that will have to come and go to the site. I mean, you only have to look down the road at Calvary and see how difficult it is to get in and out of parking or in and out of the surrounding streets of Calvary. It's virtually impossible at certain times of day.
Alderman Briscoe?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your outline of your concerns, which are very clearly stated. I'm wondering whether, irrespective of whether there's approval for this hospital or not tonight, there is an issue that requires intervention by the council. And would you support resident parking 2 hour zones, 2 hour zones for everyone else, and resident all day parking in your street or the streets nearby?
Well, I think if the hospital goes ahead, it'll be required. I think we don't require it at the moment, but in my street, I can only speak for my street and where I drive, because I haven't done any surveys, but in my street, we're just coping.
Yes.
Some days, half of my street, at the top of Jennings Street, which butts onto Clare Street, is fully parked out. Now, it's only because people have driveways and they can park off street because they go up and catch the bus to go into town.
Yes.
And I think that if it gets any more, it will mean that people who have off-street parking for themselves, there will be difficulty if they have a visitor. I think it's getting to capacity.
Yes, I suppose in the 27 years I've been on council, the commuter ban has gone further and further out of the town.
It has.
Yes, and it's probably arrived quite... so I think whatever happens tonight, I think we should refer a motion to the Infrastructure Committee to consider resident parking, do a survey of the residents there and see whether there is appetite for that, yeah. Because if it is a problem, I think we probably can't solve it tonight of residential parking and commuter parking, but we can tell ask the Infrastructure Committee to look at it.
It'll more than likely just push it out to the further part of Newtown.
Oh, yes.
Because it's the new restrictions that have come in North Hobart and Newtown that has moved cars to our street. The other big issue is the right turn out of Clare Street into Augusta Road. It's just dangerous.
Well, you know, there's a number of us on council trying to improve parking in the city, so we don't have the commuter ban move further and further out. Yeah.
So, are there any further questions? Just in relation, you mentioned school children. There's a number of schools in particular.
Yes.
So, those school children are crossing Newtown Road in particular, or I suppose there are students in particular crossing in that area?
The biggest issue really is the schools that are closest to me is the amount of traffic delivering those children to school, simply because their parents are fearful of them crossing. They don't want them crossing the main road or Clare Street or Augusta Road.
I see.
Because it is so terribly busy.
Yeah, and just to Alderman Briscoe's point, we are looking at local area management plans and looking at how we might reduce the impact of those particular problems.
Safety of children is...
Of course. So if you'd like to take your seat again, thank you very much. And Rachel, if you can write down again, thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll call now Mr. Rocco De Carlo. Thanks, Mr. De Carlo. So you have 5 minutes to raise your questions or points. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Rocco De Carlo and I represent my father, Dominic De Carlo, owner of 46 Newtown Road. The property he has owned for the past 30 years and is currently occupied by 3 separate tenants. This proposal, whilst in name includes 46 Newtown Road, as an owner of the property, we have not agreed to, been consulted with or provided with any details by the developer on 46 Newtown Road's inclusion. This is the third proposal to Council. It is our third objection. Yet still the developer has not provided the 82-year-old owner any documentation outlining their intentions regarding 46 Newtown Road. Is it a common occurrence for developers to make demands of neighbouring property in applications? As a homeowner, it is my understanding that I have control of what happens in my property. The application states realignment of existing sewer infrastructure. However, no clarification on why this must occur or what it will mean for 46 Newtown Road or tenants of this property. Were Council and or Taswater to agree to facilitate the proposed development by carrying out invasive and restrictive infrastructure works on my property, this would be an outrageous and improper extension of the powers contained within the Urban Drainage Act 2013 and Water and Sewage Industry Act 2008. The extensively detailed applications make little to no reference of the property at 46 Newtown Road, the Harvest Home Inn, circa 1836, which is approximately 184 years old and situated on the southern side of the development and has not been considered in the submission before Council. 46 Newtown Road, zoned urban mixed use, is a residential property with 3 separate tenancies, one a long-term tenant of over 25 years. The Council has provided the developer with conditions regarding existing infrastructure. However, these do not reference their intentions at 46 Newtown Road. The conditions reference the owner is required to make good at their own cost. As the owner of 46 Newtown Road, we do not accept liability for any of the costs involved in this proposal. The scale and intensity of this proposal will make this property undesirable for residential purposes during and following development. The extensive excavation and construction of a solid wall 9.96 metres high above ground level and an excavation 2.5 levels below ground level, plus footings, all within 2.5 metres of the habitable rooms of 46 Newtown Road. This proposal and the conditions proposed in Hobart City Council documents, which form part of the agenda today, fail to address the effect upon 46 Newtown Road. The drawings show the shadowing of 46 Newtown Road, and it will be in shade for a major component of every day or year round. No solar access assessment has been requested to ascertain or alleviate the concerns of the residents at this property. Engineering TR2. Access to home at 46 Newtown Road. How will this be guaranteed safely for the access and egress with major excavation and construction only metres away? Environmental 2. No mention on air quality monitoring for the residents living within 2.5 metres from demolition, excavation and construction. Environmental 9. No mention of control of noise for residents on the southern side of the development. Environmental 10. No mention of the fencing along its joined boundary. Now, unfortunately, there's a typo there of Environmental 2. The Construction Environmental Management Plan will include the proposed work at 46 Newtown Road. Part 5R1 raises concerns over the integrity of Newtown Road and protection of retaining walls and anchors, but does not include the property on the southern boundary. Heritage 11. The construction management plan requested for the construction should also cover the proposed works to infrastructure at 46 Newtown Road and the damages that could be caused during this period. Damage to the property may not be instantaneous. How long will the developers and any other contractors be liable? The Council recognised in attachment A6.8.7 that the entrapment area has been created on the southern side of this development adjacent to 46 Newtown Road and has deemed this as acceptable for the residents to respond to any untowardly act. We question why our tenants and all neighbours should be encumbered with this responsibility. Further concern is that this entrapment area, along with the frontage of 46 Newtown Road, will be used by patient staff and visitors seeking a smoking area 3 metres from a public building.
Mr. DiCarlo, 30 seconds to sum
In
up.
closing, I acknowledge that the Hobart City Council have endorsed this application for approval, and I ask the Planning Committee to consider the implication of this development on 46 Newtown Road and its neighbours and Greater Hobart, and ensure that it and its residents are protected within the conditions of any approval, as this will be a legacy on Newtown Road and in the Newtown precinct.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe, we'll start with you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Look, thank you for that, and you did send us a letter as well, which covered the same things. I think possibly in a moment I might, when we start discussing that, we ask the Director or the planning staff to respond to each of them, and maybe it will take some time. Maybe not tonight, but before the council meeting. So I think what you bring up to me on the face of it are very reasonable requests, concerns. Thank you.
Councillor Data.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the points you have brought up, and I think I would endorse the points made by Alderman Briscoe, that there are pertinent points, and I am quite concerned, and I need clarification. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. Thank you.
Any questions? So I just have a question. So presumably, from what you've said, the HER 11, I think it is, the heritage
Heritage
condition.
11, yes.
Obviously, it is concerned about the damage during construction.
Oh, it's actually more through the chair. They're obviously that's involving assessing the property for the construction process, but obviously what happens with the works that will occur in the backyard and the property.
So what? Can you just explain what sort of contact you've had with the applicant in relation to your land or your father's property?
We received a phone call several years ago when we were on a trip away, and that's it. And that was in reference to that there was going to be something occurring next door, and there's been nothing else. And that's been, I'm pretty sure, through all our other deputations through the other two processes that's been written in there as well. And also, yeah, that was stated in the other two objections as well. So, again, I have approached the council, I've been very helpful in trying to explain things out. Tasmania unfortunately can't assist us because there is no planning permit. We've only got a planning permit for the HCC. So there's nothing to forward us on to that to see, well, what exactly is going to occur. We only have access through one driveway, and that's not a great driveway for the size of the potential equipment that may well be required to do that task if it was to occur.
Councillor Harvey?
So can you confirm that there's definitely going to be work on your dad's property?
Allegedly, according to the drawings, there are, but I truly don't know.
We'll ask. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and so currently your father, does he live there or is it?
No.
No, so he leases it
Yes.
to residential.
There's 3 tenancies in that property at the moment, and they have children. At the moment, they have children, they have vehicles, so they do park around the back.
I see. Okay. All right. Thanks, Mr. DiCarlo. If you'd like to take your seat again.
Thank you.
And we'll call the proponents after the wipe down. So we have Ms. Duckett, Mr. Shadell, Mr. Raven, and that's just the 3 of you? Yes. All right. So thank you. If you'd like to come to the table. And you've heard the concerns raised, and obviously this is a different iteration from the previous plans that we've seen, so perhaps you can talk us through some of that as well, but if you can address some of those concerns raised and whether there's any sort of other improvements that could be done.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair, perhaps if I could start by just responding to those issues raised by the representors, and then I'll hand over to Mr. Raven just to briefly outline the changes to the plans and any responses that we may have also to the concerns that were raised. So just starting with the last one, with Mr. DiCarlo's concerns, I know that the development engineers did make contact before the first application was made, and there was a response received that Mr. DiCarlo's father didn't want to have any further contact, and the matter had been referred to their solicitors. They asked us not to make further contact, and after that we fulfilled the obligations of the Act by notifying the owner of the land that an application was being made. So in each case there's documentation of that notice being sent to the applicant. But yeah, there was no further discussion from that point of view, as the matter had been referred to their solicitor and they didn't want to talk any further. In relation to the other 2 representations, as you pointed out, the car parking discretion in this application is an excess of car parking, not a shortfall of car parking. So the requirement for car parking has been determined by the planning scheme, by the schedule in the planning scheme, and that's been met. The concerns about car parking, about traffic in Augusta Road and Clare Street, I think are largely unfounded, as the public access to the car park is from Newtown Road, so I don't envisage that there'll be any even noticeable increase in traffic from Clare Street or Augusta Road, as that's simply for service vehicles, so a small number of service vehicles a day, but no increase in public traffic or access for the public from that point. They need to access from Newtown Road. As you'll be aware, in the planning report, the key issues that were raised with previous applications in relation to building height and setbacks to residential boundaries are now compliant. They fully respond to the scheme's requirements, acceptable solutions. And therefore the issues of height, overshadowing and amenity issues have been addressed fully. I'll let Mr. Raven now talk about the changes to the proposal.
Could I just, Mr De Carlo raised some other concerns in relation to 46 Newtown Road. Could you answer those as well, as to impacts?
In relation to the conditions that were listed?
Yes.
Is this coming out about 5 minutes, or is this a question?
Well, it's a question, yeah, but I mean, it would be good that that were
look,
addressed
I didn't
as
get
well.
a copy of that submission, so I don't know in detail each of the conditions that he raised. I tried to note them down as he spoke through them. But generally, the conditions for construction relate to the proposal rather than only the other side. So the proposal would include the extent of the proposal and to the extent that it applies to that site. It is quite normal, even with an adjacent development, for construction management plan to include a conditions report prior to construction commencing and follow up for any damage or repair of adjacent buildings following construction. So they're fairly standard conditions that I imagine would be address those issues.
So,
Okay.
can I jump in?
Well,
One more question. I just want to finish this one thing. So will you be digging up the neighbour's backyard?
Perhaps Mr. Raven can address it in a bit more detail, but basically the engineering solution that's been proposed has been the preferred one from Taswater, and that's why it's been submitted, because it's a better outcome, not just for this development, but for surrounding sites as well. Obviously, if there is resistance and no consent to do any works, then alternatives have to be looked at.
rightio. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Mr. Raven.
So just to finish off that discussion, so yes, there is some realignment of the existing sewer and stormwater drains that occur at the very rear of 46 Newtown Road. The works that will occur there are a simplification of the in-ground pipework that already exists, and in fact what it actually does is shifts those existing pipes closer to the rear boundary, thereby reducing the size of the easement at the rear of 46 Newtown Road. And as Ms Duckett pointed out, is the preferred solution from Taswater in regards to how those pipes are to be realigned. There's quite a complex network of connections to adjacent houses there, which makes it quite a complex issue.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you. As Ms Duckett pointed out, we've made some fairly fundamental changes to the design since we last sat here late last year. These changes have included the removal of an entire floor out of the building, which is one of the tenancy floors. That's reduced the net level area of the building by some 3,320 square metres, which is approximately 28% of the floor area. In addition, we've removed a substantial portion of the roof plant that was located on the roof, and that has now been shifted into lower levels of the building, and in particular to one of the basement levels. In addition to that, we've lowered the entire building 1 metre into the ground, and as a result of that, the entry to the building is now shifted down to the north along Newtown Road to suit the existing levels. So the entry, which was previously towards the southern end of the site, is now more centrally located to the site. In addition, we've substantially increased the setbacks at the upper level of the building to both the Clare Street and Seymour Street properties, and those setbacks are now in excess of 10 metres. As a result of those changes, the building now meets the acceptable solutions for height, in terms of both height generally across the site and height in relation to the adjoining residential properties. And we also meet the acceptable solutions for setback from all adjoining properties. We've touched on car parking already, so I won't go into great detail, but as noted before, we're required to provide 236 car parks. We provide 248, so there's an excess of some 12 car parks, which under the scheme requires a performance solution. And I note that Council's planners and Council's engineering staff have accepted those proposals. As a result of these changes, the building planning has been amended. We now have a reduced footprint across both levels of the building, and we are no longer able to locate the hospital on one entire floor, which was the original preference for the building. So the hospital has now been split across 2 floors, with the clinical floors located at the upper floor and the wards located at the lower floor. Tenancy space has shifted to the lower ground floor, which has resulted in the addition of a recessed courtyard to the north end of Newtown Road, which provides natural light and amenity to that tenancy space. And in addition, the lower basement floor plan has been increased in size in order to provide the required number of car parks. And in fact, as mentioned before, we actually provide slightly more. These fundamental changes have substantially reduced the building mass and visual bulk. And if I could get someone, so I don't have control over the presentation, just to perhaps cycle through. These are the montages that have been prepared for the site, which give impression of the visual scale and bulk of the building. The Newtown Road facade has been completely redesigned, as the proportions of the building now being much lower than previously proposed, significantly impact on the way the building is perceived, and therefore the way the building has been designed. We've picked up on some of the comments and advice that we've previously been provided, in particular through the UDAP panel, as well as both the planners and elected members, in terms of breaking up the horizontal scale of the building. The Newtown Road facade, which we'll come back to here in a second, incorporates a much greater degree of articulation, particularly in terms of its depth and the angle of facades. There are a series of setbacks across the Newtown Road facade. Portions of the facade have been angled to provide a much greater degree of articulation to the facade. And the building has been broken up along Newtown Road into 3 distinct sections where facade treatments have been varied. To the south end of the site, I think if we can just hold here would be good. To the south end of the site is a very simple commercial form, which has got the Tasman Private Hospital sign on it. A simple clad form sitting over a recessed plinth. To the centre of the site is the main entry, which is very much an open glazed form, and adjacent to that, slightly to the south of that, is a similarly glazed form, and then to the north we've introduced a brick element to the design, which picks up on a very typical and dominant building material and feature within the local area. And the detailing of that portion of the facade has been is broken down into much smaller and finer details to reflect a more residential character. So the facade now represents a series of interconnected buildings as opposed to a single long unified facade, which provides a transition from the commercial development on the south side through to the residential development on the north side. Issues we've previously addressed in the previous applications, such as noise, remain largely unchanged, and again we've provided the required documentation to illustrate that. We note the recommendation for approval from council planners, and that I think recognises the significant work and significant changes that we've made to the design to meet the concerns that have been raised by planners, by elected members, and also by local residents. And I think also the significant decrease in number of representations made in objection to the application, I think, is also a reflection of the substantial changes that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you. We've run out of time, but was there anything else that you had to add, Mr. Shodell?
No, I'm fine with that, thanks.
Thank you. If we have any questions, we'll ask those. So I'll open it to questions, and we'll start with you, Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions so that I can get a comparison with, say, Warneford Street in Hobart. So how do we drop off and pick up patients? So you've taken someone to this proposed hospital. Where do I drop them off? And where do I pick them up?
So in the lower ground floor car park, there is a drop-off bay.
Yep.
So people will be entering the site on Newtown Road from the northern car park and going down into the basement car park, and there is a dedicated drop-off area there, right adjacent to the main lift foyer and lifts that take people up to the hospital. Okay, so I can turn either left into the entry or right into the entry off Newtown Road. So there'll be both ways. Okay, and no pick up and drop off out the front of the hospital. Everybody will be encouraged to go in. Okay. So comparing the current facility in Warneford Street, how many surgeries, how many theatres do they have there?
Three theatres.
Okay. Compared to 7 in the new place? Yep. Because I've never noticed a traffic problem in Warneford Street, to be honest. And with regard to staff arrival and departure, is there staff arriving and departing throughout the day for various shifts? Or as Ms Tabor said, there's kind of 2 sessions during the day, the morning and the afternoon session. So is that accurate description?
Yeah, there are sort of 2 sessions principally, first thing in the morning, and then as lists come and go, it sort of generally spreads throughout the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And sorry,
I was lining up, sorry, don't mind me.
So you finished?
And one of the key components of the facility that we've developed, I think, is in comparison to our competitors. For example, we've made a very strong emphasis on parking, and also, as Matt Raven just mentioned, the ability to come in on a circular basis, drop off and then go out again is a very smooth and functioning facility. And I think I've highlighted to the committee previously that our ability to maintain that smooth functioning for both surgical staff and patients is a very critical part to making hospitals work.
Okay. And so your staff, the morning staff are expected to be there before peak hour, which would be...
That's correct.
7:30. What time's the next shift take over?
Well, it depends on the nature of the surgery. So a particular, one group of surgeons could do a number of cases per list, and if that's a busy surgeon, that could go through to midday, and if the surgeon is still working up his practice and is less busy, then he may leave earlier than that. So you'd have the sort of morning list, and then there'd be a break. People would take time off for a bite to eat, etc., and then an afternoon list.
And what time's the afternoon shift or the afternoon session start usually?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, and then everybody's out or it's completed by 5 or whatever. Okay, so you're avoiding the peak hour in the morning, and hopefully you're avoiding the rush in the evening as well. Correct. Potentially.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think I might just make reference to the fact that one of the respondents mentioned that we've now got 7 theatres in the facility, and the Nexus have been within Hobart for 27 years, as you rightly referenced, Councillor Harvey. And we're very proud to be involved in this particular project. Because we've now reduced the scale of the project so much by removing that whole floor, we've added the extra theatre, or provision for the extra theatre now, rather than, you know, running into problems with capacity further down the track, because we're very, very pleased with the way the, you know, expectations are for this hospital.
Okay. All right then. Thank you.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Harvey actually asked the question I was initially going to ask about the sort of peak hour times in the sessions. But just on the topic of the sort of spillover of parking onto residential areas, have you guys modelled, or do you guys expect that the parking that you guys have on site would be adequate to service that without having much in the way of that spillover parking?
Thank you, Councillor Barakis. It's a good point. The fact that our patients and our staff want to come to our facility, and we've provided in excess of the range of parks needed for that, in my mind, suggests that we're over-compensating, over-providing for that. Patients, if they're elderly and having cataract surgery, for example, they're not going to park in the street. If they've got lower limb or any other sort of, you know, physical surgery going on, they're not going to park in the street. The whole point of having a facility of such a standard as this one is the ability to have the parking dealt with on site, and we're over providing for it. And I think people have mentioned, you know, competitors in other areas and the problems that they've had. In my view, that is because they didn't take that particular focus in the first place. Our focus has been on over providing for parking. So there'll be very little, if any, parking in the street as a result of this development.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes. You mentioned the entrance from Clare Street, Seymour Street, would be for only service vehicles. Have we any idea of how many service vehicles would be delivering or taking away things?
Off the top of my head, I don't recall the exact numbers, but yes, the access off of Clare Street is intended for service vehicle only. That is access to the rear of the building, to the loading bay located at the rear of the building. Perhaps rather than guess, I could come back to you on that. I don't have that data right in front of me.
If it helps, Alderman Briscoe, page 33 says 60 movements per day. On the
I was actually going to guess 60.
How about councillors before? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. Councillor Coates, yes, thank you.
All right, further questions? Look, I just have a question in relation to the traffic impact statement, and I think Ms. Tabor suggested that, well, we know that when it was written, the data was drawn upon. Ms. Duckett, can you explain why, given we've had quite a lot of time to look at things over the course of these development applications, just why we haven't got more contemporary information regarding the traffic impact statements, because it has been raised every time we've had deputations.
I can't speak on behalf of Mr. Bavanovic and his methodology. Some of the differences between the figures, the discrepancies between, for example, with the Blue Gum, I imagine, and I think one of the councillors actually mentioned, is the feeder of Augusta Road, and that quite a substantial lot of traffic on Newtown Road, on Elizabeth Street, comes from Augusta Road. So going a bit further down to Newtown Road, you're going to have different traffic volumes and significantly lower because you don't have that feeder effect. So I'm not sure whether the discrepancy in the age of the data is in relation to that different points have had different surveys and different levels of development, but I can't tell you why more up-to-date surveys weren't done by him, other than the fact that given that the matter now, the parking now complies with the planning scheme, there isn't a discretion that actually rests with that.
Can I just jump in there, because in 2019, early 2019, when we prepared the initial development application, the traffic engineer did actually undertake his own traffic counts at least 2 of the intersections on either side of the site. So there is reference to older data in terms of data which I think presumably came from council or the Road Traffic Authority I'm not sure where that came from that he's relying on, but he also did undertake his own traffic counts, which I think is outlined in the report.
Okay, all right, well, maybe I can have a reference as to which...
Madam Chair, I mean, I do make reference to
okay. It's okay, thanks. And I just have another question, because we have other things to discuss. So just in relation to this very important building at 46 Newtown Road, heritage significance, obviously it's going to have significant impacts if there aren't the right sort of contingencies made for it during construction. So can you guarantee that these conditions that we have before us in relation to environment and protection will be undertaken?
Absolutely.
All right, that's an answer. Yep, thank you. All right, if there are no further questions, I'll ask you to take your seats again. Thank you very much. So we don't have any flyover because it's compliant according to setback and height. So we don't have that this time round.
The design panel did have it though, didn't it? I read somewhere.
Something which we're prepared for them, but because of the way that the models built around that area, it wasn't a very detailed model for you to look at through the...
Okay.
So I'll open the item for discussion. And we have Ms Turner here and Ms Ayres, who's the planner who's written the report. We'll start with you, Alderman Briscoe.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to move the recommendations as with the conditions.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe.
And to further that, I'm happy to pass on the concerns from 46 Newtown Road to Ms Turner, and maybe she could prepare a memo to us prior to the council meeting. I think the applicants should be congratulated for doing a massive redesign, and the concerns now basically get down, apart from the concerns obviously with 46, the concerns get down to traffic and management of parking in the area. And after we consider this motion, I'd like to consider a motion that we send a request to the Infrastructure Committee to look at the parking in the area. As you said, we need local plans for if the commuter parking has gone out as far as Newtown, or Seymour Street and Jennings Street, then I think we should be concerned about it. And so perhaps, but I think I'll leave it at that. I think it's a good development. It's needed. It now essentially fits the planning scheme. Very minor. Well, it fits the planning scheme because the performance criteria are met. So I think it was worth the wait, and I know it must have been frustrating for the applicants as well as the representatives.
Thanks, Alderman Briscoe. Alderman Varakis.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll echo what Alderman Briscoe said. I think it's a good result insofar as the applicant that's been willing to take on the feedback. I think it's been a testy application at times, but I think they've done it, and they've done it to quite some expense, I might add. But I think what we've got in front of us has kept or has answered a large number of the, perhaps not every single one, but I don't know if that's ever possible, but it's answered a large number of the concerns and representations made by some of the neighbours, and I think that's partially why a large number of the representatives have dropped off from previous applications. But I think this is a good result. I think it's a bit of a vindication of us deferring this in the past as opposed to rejecting it, and I think this is a good example of how we can move forward and find ways that the council can be comfortable approving things rather than just rejecting it. But look, I would like to see some clarification about the issue that Alderman Briscoe raised before we get that to council as well. I do think it's interesting though that we've got the situation where the parking that's been provided has been in excess of what's needed, and that's what's made it a discretionary item. But I think that's ultimately for the purposes of what we're looking at and the impact on the area, I think that's potentially a good thing, because it means that if they're providing the minimum, then we wouldn't even be discussing the traffic impact, but they're providing more than that, which would hopefully mean a lower impact on neighbouring areas. Obviously the commuter parking is a topical issue of late, one that I've been been onto. So this, I think this application is adequately addressing the parking demands of what they're going to be providing. So look, I'd be supporting that and just looking forward to getting some answers to questions that I'm sure will be asked already. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Data, then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to make 3 points. Point number 1, I would like to compliment and commend the applicant for the changes they have made. I think that's very promising. Point number 2, I am still wanting to have a clarification on the traffic assessment. It appears to be outdated, and I am concerned about that, and I would look forward to some more information. And point number 3, number 46 Newtown is still a concern to me. The clarifications are not there, the answers are not there. Therefore, I will have some reservations, supporting this at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. So perhaps on those 2 points, can we have some clarification from you, Ms Turner or Ms Ayres, in relation to the traffic assessment and the timing around that, and also any sort of opinion relating to 46 Newtown Road? Ms Turner?
Chair, I've just sent off those concerns to Ms Turner. I don't know whether she's had time to look at them. So.
I think those are, from a legal perspective, perhaps. Thank you.
So certainly, with respect to 46 Newtown Road, so under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act, the requirement is for an applicant to notify the land, if the application includes land that the applicant is not the owner of, they have to notify that owner. However, the requirement for the purposes of the planning application is only that they have to declare that they have notified. So in this case, what our application form includes is I think it's a checkbox on our online form that says if you're not the owner of the land, you declare that you have notified the owner of the application. So that is the only requirement. Council, as the body assessing the application, doesn't have to go beyond that declaration. So provided they've said that they've done it, then that is sufficient for council's purposes. I should note that the Act makes it an offence to say that you've notified when you haven't, and there is significant penalties that are involved with that. But for council's purposes, provided they've told us that they've notified the owner, in this case the owner, 46 Newtown Road, then that satisfies council's requirements, or the Act requirements.
And in relation to the traffic management, traffic assessment, is it as contemporary as possible, or did it leave your job difficult to assess?
Okay, so we rely on the traffic department of the council to look at this for us, but I've just gone through the attachments, and at page 102 is where we start to look at the traffic activity in Milan Predanovic's report, and it mentions that there's some 2017 data from nearby streets, so Roop and Perry streets, and then 2 pages down at page 104 it does say that Milan has done some additional surveys on the 13th of March in 2019. Now, I'm not an expert, so I'm not sure what traffic data is required, but this has been assessed by the senior traffic engineer who thought that the traffic impact assessment was adequate.
Okay, so that's page 104 of attachment E, councillor Data. So I'll make a note to have a look at that before the council meeting. No, further questions, Alderman Barakis?
Off the previous answer about the neighbouring
46.
Property, 46. In the situation that was sort of suggested to us by the applicants, where the owner of that property had requested that no further contact be made and everything go through the solicitor, would contact to the solicitor, like if they've sent that out there and they've said don't contact us, what's the answer there? If they've given that to the solicitor, is that enough?
Yeah, so the Act doesn't specify the method of notification. In this case, I think what they've said is that they did write to the owner notwithstanding, which would have been satisfactory.
Alderman Briscoe?
Yeah, on the similar.
Sorry, yeah, my apologies. We'll go to Councillor Harvey.
The call was Councillor Dutta, then Councillor Harvey.
My apologies.
Thank you. I think, Chair, that this is a good example of what happens when the officers are doing their due diligence with regard to planning, and I have no doubt that they do that all the time. And that when the community have concerns, that they know how to voice their views as well. And being the third pass, we've come a long way from the first pass with this development. So I'm comfortable supporting this tonight because I believe we have done our due diligence as a committee and as a council, representing the planning scheme and not just being a rubber stamp for everything or anything. So had we had a different council, it might have overturned the original officer's recommendation for refusal during the first pass, but we were strong enough as a council to say no. We reject that. We support the officer's recommendation for refusal. Second pass was deferred and led to a really good outcome, or much better outcome than we started with. So I'm comfortable tonight that this proposal meets the standards well enough, that the community concerns have been somewhat minimised. There's still some concerns, but I'm comfortable enough tonight to say that I'll be supporting this proposal for a new hospital in Newtown Road.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. Now, we go back to the concerns with 46.
Sure.
My understanding of what Ms Duckett said was that, and could you confirm that, Ms Turner, was that whilst there's a proposal to do works on 46, if the owner says no, they'll have to come back to us with a different solution?
We assess what's before us. The application included 46 Newtown Road. It's a matter for the developer to determine how in fact they do that work. If the owner of 46 Newtown Road does not allow them to do it, then that's correct. The applicant would need to come back to council with an alternate solution to address that if it's required.
Right, so it could be a minor amendment which is dealt over on the other side, it doesn't even get back to us.
If the works on 46 Newtown Road were proposed with no other development, it wouldn't need a planning permit. The only reason it falls for assessment is because it is to facilitate the bigger development. So
in a way, if the applicant wishes, if it gets approved for the development to be facilitated, then they should start talking to 46 pretty quickly, I imagine. Yeah. I suppose some of the concerns which I've forwarded the email does refer to things like dust and noise and construction time. That would be covered, I think it's covered in some of the conditions, but also be covered in the building permit, wouldn't it?
The building permit doesn't necessarily address impacts of construction. It addresses construction methods.
Yes.
And there's very detailed provisions with respect to protection works if it's required under the Act, with respect to how you have to deal with adjacent properties, including condition reports and the like.
Yes.
It doesn't ordinarily put conditions around dust, for example. However, there are requirements in the Building Act that you can't cause a nuisance to adjoining properties through the creation of dust. And if you do, you're creating an offence which council can then take action for.
So because it's adjacent to a residential zone, then one expects then there would be limits to the time that they can start work and do all that jazz.
Yes, so the environmental legislation does control when construction can start.
Thank you.
All right, any further comments?
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate the clarification. It puts it in a much more clearer right. But I will still have my reservation, but I will, read that further and then make the decision at the council. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question, and of course traffic traffic and parking has been brought up. Do you feel that those other Ms Ayres, do you feel that the other, or these can be addressed from both conditions but also through engineering solutions? I don't expect that you're going to have the answer specifically to that. You're not an expert in engineering, but have you seen that in other situations where planning approval is subject to traffic conditions, but also these other things can be picked up through other means.
Certainly in this case, we've looked at conditioning traffic management for the development so that both for the construction and through the ongoing use of the site. So what we've done is we've tried to condition timing around the vehicle movements for the service vehicles entering and exiting via Clare Street. I don't know how much more can be done through condition to manage the wider implications, but I guess that the planning scheme is more limited to focusing on the site of the development and the immediate junctions nearby. If there are wider implications, that's probably something for the traffic section perhaps looking at that separately to the planning process.
All right, and that'll be picked up in your foreshadowed motion.
Yeah.
All right. Look, I'd just like to thank everybody who has been involved in this process. It's been a very long and drawn-out process with the various iterations of this development application for this site. I know that it has caused a lot of consternation and perhaps a lot of organising through local residents who have been faced with a behemoth and now to this application, which is it considers setback, as it probably should have in the first place, and height. The bulk is obviously one of the biggest concerns, because of it being such a large site. So I thank the applicant for improving the application. Obviously there are some circumstances such as the traffic impact, which is still somewhat of a problem on both perceived problem on both Clare Street and Newtown Road and of course Augusta Road. So I think that we'll need to look at that really carefully with any sort of local area management plan. And I'd also like to thank the council planning staff for the work that they have done to take it back and forth so much of the time. So if there's no further discussion, I'll put the item moved without amendment by Alderman Briscoe. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? So show of hands for those in favour.
Alderman Briscoe, Alderman Barakis, Councillor Coates, Councillor Harvey and the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Those against?
Councillor Dutta.
Councillor Dutta, and so that's carried, and that will go to full council next Tuesday for further consideration. So I ask now for those who don't want to stay, we have other items.
Foreshadowed.
Oh, sorry, the foreshadowed motion. My apologies before you do go.
So that this committee refers to the Infrastructure Committee a request to consider parking, commuter parking issues and traffic issues in the surrounding residential areas.
Thank you. Thank you. Discussion?
Yeah, only to say I'm not sure if Alderman Briscoe is aware, but we do have a parking report coming which will look at all the various precincts. So I'm not against what you're asking for, other than there will be a comprehensive parking plan for all of our residential areas.
So in moving that, then the response to that request could be that we'll await that report. Yeah, but I think there is a specific problem here that has been identified during the planning process, which is not a planning matter because of what was said earlier. So I still think we should move the motion.
Yeah.
I'm happy to support the motion, but I'm just letting you know it is slightly superfluous because it's already coming back, and that will hopefully be there.
Thank you.
You'll get a clarification of the answer.
Alderman Barakis?
I suppose to that point, can I get the motion read out again?
I just made it up on the spot. I'll try again.
Have you got that?
Well, it's to do with commuter and parking and traffic issues in the vicinity of the development. So we're looking at Newtown Road, Augusta Road, Clare Street.
Yes.
I suppose, yeah.
Thanks.
And
Jennings.
Yes.
I suppose, yeah, if it's not limited specifically to parking, it's the broader traffic and
parking.
infrastructure issue. It might not necessarily be redundant if it's exploring. I take the point, but if it's exploring the broader infrastructure
And
concerns,
perhaps,
it might be.
perhaps Alderman Briscoe, you might consider whether there's discussion with the applicant in relation to reducing the amount of traffic requirements on the site. So that's a more sophisticated...
On the site?
Well, movement
Oh,
relating
traffic
to the function of 48 Newtown Road.
Yeah, I suppose that could have been advice on the previous motion, but I'm happy to include that in if that's the will of the chair thinks that's a good idea. But anyway, yes,
You understand that, committee and Mr. Banks? Yep. Okay.
Try and reduce the traffic from Clare Street, basically, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, the overall traffic in
and out,
like the movement of people in and out of the site. So
okay.
we can nuance that if you like.
Yeah, I think it could be
Okay,
nuanced, yeah.
if the committee's happy with that, we'll move that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Thank you, Ms Turner and Ms Ayres. Appreciate that. And if you'd like to vacate
Subbing out.
the room.
Mhm. Thank you.
Ms Turner, you're staying around for the closed item. Thank you. All right. And do we need to get the representatives in?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just take the opportunity to run to the...
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
I'll be right back. I told you it didn't go there, wasn't it? Okay.
Okay. Okay, are we ready to go with our deputations?
Director, well done.
Welcome back.
Great to be here. You were really tall, I see, and she was really short. You were like giant.
So we're getting now. Committee, we're on to item 7.1.2, 25 Weld Street, which is part of the main agenda. Page 162 of the main agenda. All right, thank you. So 25 Weld Street, and I call Representative Ms Ellie Baker. If you'd like to come to the table, please. Thanks for your patience today. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I'd like to make a representation against the proposed demolition and extension at 25 Weld Street. I'm also speaking on behalf of my immediate neighbours, Dr Sharma, who could not attend this meeting due to work commitments. I'm the owner and occupier of a home which is immediately adjacent to the proposed development. I have made a written objection against the proposal along with 3 other households who are my direct neighbours in townhouses at 8 Wynyard Street. A recommendation of refusal has been made by your development appraisal planner, and I'd like to further support this technical recommendation. As part of my written representation, I engaged, along with my neighbours, urban planner Irene Duckett, who produced a technical report on our behalf. I would like to provide some insight into the technical points which have been addressed in this report and by the city planner. Firstly, the proposal does not comply with the planning scheme regarding setback and building envelope, and because of this, the performance criteria had to be addressed. The visual impact will be significant to neighbours. The visual bulk, height, size and scale is overwhelming and unreasonably detrimental from the courtyards, kitchen, dining and living spaces of adjacent neighbours at 8 Wynyard Street. Our properties have minimal open space and our only private outdoor area would be directly overlooked and shaded by the proposed extension. At Wynyard Street, we are a community of 24 townhouses where we are friends with our neighbours. We barbecue and dine outside in our courtyards, we garden, families play with their children, pets lounge, and we host friends. This is our only private outdoor space, and our properties were designed specifically in that way, where we have large sliding doors to our courtyards to facilitate outdoor entertaining. The height, bulk and scale of the proposal would unreasonably impact our quality of life in terms of privacy, being overlooked, noise, reduced sunlight, overshadowing, in particular in the winter months where the afternoon sun is so important, and visual impact of the imposing development. Our townhouses have stepped down courtyards. This means that the height and imposition of the proposed development gets worse and more dominant as we move down the hill. Because of the narrowness of our courtyards, there is no opportunity to step back to put the proposed building addition into perspective. so the scale of the proposal is unreasonably high. The opportunity for us to see blue sky will also be significantly reduced because we can't step back from the bulk and height of the development. Many of our townhouses will be dark with reduced natural sunlight. 25 Weld Street is a heritage listed property which I don't believe was adequately addressed in the application. The development is unsympathetic to heritage features. It's dark and overwhelming in terms of materials. Also, the size and the scale of the addition isn't in scale to the existing buildings on the heritage listed property. I'm concerned about the intensity of use of the property. It's currently operated as a full-time Airbnb, yoga business, along with an art studio, business and home to the developer. How much more can you fit onto a site in a school zone and not implicate traffic and noise to neighbours? The developer hasn't tried to contact his neighbours in Wynyard Street to discuss a proposal or mediate. I have never met the owner. The developer has taken an aggressive approach and the lack of consultation is unreasonable. The size of the property is large. I believe the developer is trying to be cost effective in this addition by building on top of a pre-existing yoga studio. However, this is at the direct cost of neighbours. I'm pro-development. I live in a block of townhouses, so I understand the realities of inner city residential areas. However, I'd suggest there is a more suitable location on the large block that doesn't negatively impact so many neighbouring families. The unit in construction at 23 Weld Street, so not 25, 23 Weld Street, should also not set any precedents for actions at 25 Weld Street. That unit was approved before the townhouses at 8 Wynyard Street were built, so there were no neighbours to object and there was no physical building to demonstrate the impact on quality of life of residents. I would suggest that the approval was theoretical and subjective given no physical buildings existed or neighbours to object to the performance criteria interpretations, given so many of the planning scheme clauses were not met in that instance. Another difference is that the unit at 23 Weld Street is on the same ground level as its neighbours, compared to 25 Weld Street that directly impacts neighbours who are stepped down at least a floor below ground level, exacerbating the proposed height of the development. The proposal seeks to maximise intensity of use of the site and financial return for the owner, while compromising the heritage fabric of the property. The visual bulk of the proposed development...
30 seconds, if you'd like to finish up. Thank you.
So the visual bulk of the proposed development is entirely at the expense of the adjacent neighbours, including our property values and our quality of life. Who wants to live in a dark, gridlocked and overlooked property? Not me. The bulk, scale, setback and intensity of the proposal is entirely unreasonable and is unsympathetic to its heritage. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Now, I'll open it to the committee for questions. Are there any questions? No questions? So you've not had a chance, you mentioned that you haven't had a chance to speak with the proponent.
No.
Would you feel that there's an opportunity for compromise in relation to that if you did have the chance to speak?
Look, in its current location, no, but I'm not across their entire property. Obviously, I've only seen what's in the planning application in terms of like a Google Maps image. It looks like it's quite a large site, so if the applicant did want to have a conversation, I'm open to having a conversation about somewhere else on their property.
And if there were any sort of changes to, if it were conditioned for approval and there were changes to the form, like the building materials, would that have a desirable impact on the application?
Look, not really, because the major issue is the height of it. The fact that we have our step-down courtyards, the current building is already a floor above, so it's just exacerbating that issue. So, look, softening it probably won't do much, given that it's so close to the boundary and it's so high, and imposing with the dark materials.
All right, thank you. If there are no further questions, I'll ask you to take your seat. In a moment, I'll get Ms. Jane Addison to come to the table. Thank you. Ms. Addison? Now, if you have different concerns, if you'd like to raise those. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for providing us with the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I would like to endorse the concerns expressed by my neighbour Ellie Baker this evening, but I'd also like to highlight the specific impacts on my property, if I may. I also endorse the findings of the planning officer, and I note that she has recommended against approval of this development and noted that it is unreasonably detrimental to the residents of, I think, particularly Unit 16 and 17. I own and occupy Unit 17 at 8 Wynyard Street, and my property is directly behind the proposed development. I would like to thank the planning officer and indeed the councillors who visited the site to consult with us and to see the impact firsthand. It's very much appreciated. I share and endorse the concerns that my neighbours have expressed about heritage values and traffic and noise. I moved to South Hobart about a year and a half ago to join a peaceful village with nature and a sense of history around us, where we can hear the voices of children and the sound of birds, walk my dog and walk to work down the rivulet path and enjoy the very welcome winter sunshine in what could otherwise be quite a cold location. So that sunshine is particularly important to us there. These unique and special aspects are what convinced me to make a pretty major change from an older home to a modern townhouse. I would not have bought a townhouse that was hemmed in by modern buildings on all sides and that felt like a part of a vanilla community of modern development. So in my view, this proposed development isn't in keeping with the values of the South Hobart community, and nor is it necessary on what is quite a large site. My particular concern about this proposed development is the visual bulk and impact it will have on my only and very limited private outdoor space. As Ellie said, the rear courtyards on the Wells Street side of Tanners Row, 8 Wynyard Street, are narrow, but they gather afternoon sun all year. My courtyard provides enough space and sunshine for a small garden, enables me to have a dog who enjoys lying in the sun, as I do, and for me to enjoy eating and sitting in the courtyard and using the hammock that's outdoors in the sunshine. It also provides light, sunshine and a view of the sky from my only indoor living space. There are 3 reasons that this proposed development has a particularly severe impact on my property. First of all, the proposed development is directly behind my unit and backs onto my rear boundary. Secondly, and very importantly, the courtyard stepped down the hill, so my courtyard ground level is well below the ground level of 25 Wells Street. So I already look up several metres to the roof of the existing one-storey building that sits on the boundary above my rear retaining wall and fence. Thirdly, as we step down the hill, each townhouse loses the afternoon sun a bit earlier due to the hill to the north of our property on the other side of the rivulet. So this proposed development at 25 Wells Street will further reduce that window of sunlight, particularly as the sun swings round behind the mountain through the year. These 3 factors make the visual impact and loss of sunlight even worse from my home than on those to my south, noting, of course, that the owners of Units 14 and 16 to my south have made very valid representations themselves. The addition of a further 6 metres of height, given that I'm already well below ground level, will absolutely tower over my courtyard. The effect of that is that the only way I'll see any sky from my ground floor is by lying in the hammock and looking straight up. There'll be no sky view from the inside, making my only living area dark, hemmed in and a bit depressing. I submit that this is an unreasonably significant impact, given that this is my only outdoor private space and has such a key impact on my indoor living space. So I request that you don't approve this application, and thank you for considering my concerns.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Alderman Briscoe.
Oh yeah, very similar to the question you asked the previous representative. If the applicant is of the mind to defer the item for discussions with the neighbours, would you be interested in that and see if there is any possible compromise or changes?
I would be happy to have a discussion, absolutely, and I'm disappointed that that discussion hasn't taken place already. In its current form, with the height directly above my boundary fence, that's not going to be acceptable to me. But if there's room for compromise on the height or the setback, or indeed the location on the overall site, then I'd be happy to discuss that.
Thank you.
Councillor Coates.
Look, just in reviewing the plans, and obviously I hear what you've just said in regards to the height and bulk and size directly opposite your rear fence, but in your mind, has it, I guess, is it at least improved? I'm noticing that it is actually slanted away from your property, and although I'm not sure it's necessarily conditioned, in the drawings before us we've got foliage, so trees, around the site. Does that, in terms of the visual impact from your property, does that go some ways towards helping, or what are your sort of thoughts around that?
The foliage and trees absolutely go some way towards helping. My concern about that, though, is that there's not an obligation for that foliage and tree element to be, as I understand it, to be actually put there or indeed maintained. So I'm a bit worried that I'll end up without that foliage and tree softening. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to take your seat again. It comes up. We'll just wipe the table again. Thanks, Rachel. And I'll now call upon the applicant, Mr. Nick Goodwolf, if you'd like to come to the table, please. And you've had a chance to hear the concerns of your direct neighbours. Perhaps you can answer some of those questions. And have you got something for the committee?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Ask Rachel.
Yeah, that's all good to go.
And we have a larger picture on screen as well.
Why, thank you.
We have, thank you. All right.
Thank you for your time. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge what I think it's really important, and I'd like...
Copy, please.
It's sad that we haven't met, and so the letter is an important part of that, because when I submitted the application to Ms. Nolan, I sent her a letter which meant to be attached to the application, or if someone had concerns, we sent her to you in that letter, which you both have. I don't think you received it, and basically it was stating that this is a place of dialogue, and I really can see that there is, with a dialogue, you actually can achieve better outcomes than...
Okay, Mr. Goodwolf, if you could talk to the committee, that would be good, and it just gets the audio gets picked up as well. Thank you.
So, just to answer some of the questions which were in front of us, one of the issues which came up was sunlight. So, if someone could flick through the images, the last image is called Sun. I think it's image 11, all the way back. Yeah, beautiful. That's the image I was looking for. So this project didn't come from nowhere. It was really a project where I was looking at it for a long time. This is taken last year on at the end of June, end of July. The date is up on top. It's 2:40 p.m. and the sun is disappearing from behind the hill. And this is the problem we have in South Hobart. It darkens really early. So after 3 o'clock, we actually lose all sunlight. So as you can see, there is actually no sunlight for us too, and for the tannery side going inside the building. Just to clarify the issue of location. So when you apply software programs to the sun diagrams, they don't take into account actually the hill itself. We qualified even without that through Ms. Nolan, because she was asking for more sun input, and we supplied it and it was all approved. So sun has not been a stumbling point in this application. But just, I thought this is important just to note that there is actually no sun aspect or effect from the proposed development. Foliage, I think it's a really important point, and we had there's a case in Hobart where a big development, a big hotel was approved with foliage meant to be attached to it, and it didn't actually happen. I can only say that I do, and the elected members who came to visit our house saw how I live and how I grow, and this is a really big part of how I live, and I think it's a really very good idea to attach it to a permit, that this is a requirement of any development. In this case, what we're proposing, that foliage and the upkeep of green areas as proposed is kept up. Heritage, really important as well. 25 Wells Street is a case study for Heritage Tasmania. It was in the publication which was produced about 7 years ago as a successful way of building on a heritage listed site, and it's been used by Heritage Tas in many instances. The publication is here. If you want to look at it later, that's I would love to show you. And the heritage, the concerns of the first speaker, I do understand. It's a big site, but in order for us to qualify for heritage clearance, we are obeying to certain requirements, and one of the requirements is that you do set the heritage parts of the building apart from the non-heritage parts. You make a statement between the two, and it's not about occupying all the sites. So you cluster your structural buildings around one place, and so it's like bookending a site. And so this is advice which we have been given by Heritage Tas and Heritage Hobart, and we have been working with a number of the officers here to get that outcome and location. So the initial proposal actually had a corridor linking the new extension with the old, and it was taken away for that heritage reason. The other important part is the modulating of the facade is something Heritage feels really strongly about. I do feel strongly about it too. So if we flick through some of the, just probably image number 2, where we have a bit of a plan. Yeah, that's, yeah, that's cool. If you look at that, that image, it's a good, I'll probably get to it in a second, but it sort of shows you too how the facade on the top can be viewed from the Wynyard Street houses, and due to its steep angle, it is really important to have a facade which is a modulated facade, and it's alive, and it does not detract, or does detract from visual bulk. Visual bulk is a really important part. I'm in that sort of position where there will be very few sites in Hobart which had more development going around the boundaries than our building. There was 24 apartments and the apartments behind it. So what we're looking at here is something which I think works quite successfully in terms of looking at increased living space for my growing family, who are adults and will live on site, and they yeah, so that's part of the vision, what we try to...
Mr Goodwolf, your time is virtually up. Is there anything else that you wanted to
Yes, if we flick through, there's one image I would really like to show you. It's a drawing. Yeah, one further. No, one... There must be a drawing, a hand-drawn. Oh, this is the one. So, on the report, there was an image of one of the apartments looking up, and this is the taken off the page 161, and so you can see the wall, the fence, the yoga studio, and then on the top section you can see the proposed new extension. So what you actually see is 1.2 metres of it due to its setback off the roof and the slanting on the wall, and that would represent in that image between 10 and 15% of the overall vista. Now, that will be softened as well through the vegetation. For me, we have been working hard just to get it to that point, and we feel we address visual bulk really well, and we do acknowledge there is a concern for my neighbours.
Thank you. All right, we'll might ask some questions now. So Alderman Briscoe, then Councillor Data.
Yes, thank you for that. It is you've got a very interesting property. I did visit it today. I'm sure if the representatives visit the property, realise the extent that you protect heritage and enhance it. Would you be so that the representatives maybe can talk to you and maybe find some compromise or some understanding between you and your neighbours? Would you be interested in us deferring it for a few weeks, so opportunity for the officers to organise a meeting with you and representatives?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Data.
Thank you, Chair. There's a similar question.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yes. The concerns, I think, are quite real in relation to the applicant, representatives who live directly opposite, because like there's quite a gradient drop as you've shown in your diagrams, and particularly looking up. Do you think there are ways that you can ameliorate some of those concerns that you heard tonight?
I think that's why there is, if you could probably flick to that diagram, we have that sight line in it.
I think we're familiar with it if it doesn't come up, but yes.
Yeah, that's I can talk you through it. I think it's important to understand how far back it actually. That's the one.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. How far back the extension actually is on the new roof line, and how the angling of the roof can detract from the visual bulk of the building. I think that's we can still refine that. I think this doesn't have to be the end of our discussion here. I think there is ways we can solve the problem to make it even more smaller. And I do understand that it is a tricky position where the Tannery apartments were built, and I do acknowledge that.
Thank you. Okay. All right. If there are no further questions, I'll ask you to take your seat again. And thank you for your comments. Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, look, you basically said what I was going to say. Look, the Tanner apartments there, and the first time I've been into them since they were built, and they're lovely apartments, but they have got very small backyards, and it is their living area, essentially, and I visited 2 apartments, and I thank those people for the invitation there, and one had two small kids, and their backyard was the place for the kids to play. So I think if we could take up the applicant's offer that he would happy to give a deferral to talk to the representatives, if there are some ways we could reduce or eliminate any bulk that's been identified by the officers, then I think we should give the opportunity. I sense that all neighbours have got goodwill, and so if we get them together, it may be a solution rather than going through a winner and loser type situation here. So at an appropriate time, Chair, I'll be moving for a deferral.
Is everybody happy to go with that directly, or do you want further discussion? Councillor Coates?
I've actually just got a question through you to the Director. Sure. Just to clarify a comment made by the proponent, where he said originally they were looking at having it, and I might not be quoting this correctly, but connected to the house, but because of heritage concerns it had to be moved back. Are you aware of that? Is it a heritage? Is the reason that this is essentially predominantly the back of the property done because of heritage concerns?
Look, I don't know the specific nature of the conversations that were had, but there may have been some interruption to the historic fabric that was of concern to the Heritage Council, with a proposal that was adjoining in the form that it was being proposed. So that could be the case.
Right. So I'll put Alderman Briscoe's motion for deferral.
Officers organise a meeting of the representatives and the applicant.
Thank you. No
and
problems
there
with
was
that.
some paperwork involved in that from the applicant, isn't there, to get an extension?
For extension.
Yeah, you need for an extension.
Thank you for that.
Okay. I'll put the motion for deferral. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion's carried unanimously. So you'll be contacted in relation to organising some sort of conciliation. Thank you. If you'd like to vacate your chairs. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, I'll ask that we adjourn. Do I need a motion to adjourn this? Yep. So, Alderman Barratas.
Open the closed.
So I'll adjourn the open and suggest that we have, after this next item, a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back with the live stream. So if we could move that, I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against?
We have the 15-minute break now.
Would you like a 15-minute
Yes,
break now?
I think so.
Yes? Okay, well, we
I
can
think
do
councillor
that.
Dale is having a break regardless.
Oh, yeah, it's only one person though, isn't it?
Is he out there?
3 people.
3 people, but it's the same item, isn't it?
It is. Okay, well, we'll...
Or it could even be a
it's the
10-minute break, it doesn't matter.
10-minute break, yep. So we'll be back here at 7 o'clock.